Hello, my name is Jeff Parsley. I work for SRK Consulting here in the United States. I'm currently serving as the chair, and my specialty is environmental and mine closure work for the mining industry. Today's Fireside Chat is part of the sustainably funding the global mineral supply chain conference put on by the SME. And today's topic in this will be how can explorers and developers position themselves for the long term. And today with me, we have two guests, Phil Baker and Chris Taylor. Phil, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then Chris.
Sure. Well, I'm Phil Baker. I'm president and CEO of Hecla Mining Company, and I've worked for Hecla for about the last 20 years. I've been the CEO for about 17, 18 years now. And, you know, when you talk about what is it that explorers and developers should do to position themselves for the long term, Hecla is 130 years old. So we have some view as to what it is you need to do to be successful. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And I'm Chris Taylor. I'm the president and CEO of Great Bear Resources. I'm a geologist by background. I've worked in a number of mines. Great Bear is on the opposite end of the spectrum from Hecla. We are a single asset developer company. So we've got a big gold discovery in Canada, and we're going through the same sort of environmental and social concerns that a number of other companies in our space are. And it's very crucial for us to get buy-in from the local communities in order to permit and advance the projects in a timely and appropriate manner. So very happy to participate in this discussion today.
Okay, gentlemen. So basically, we're going to be talking about what mining companies need to do to attract and retain investors, maintain social license to operate, and basically just function in the current climate of responsible investing. Obviously, the mining industry has a long history, some of it good, some of it perhaps not so good. And today we're going to try and unpack some of the ideas of what it takes to be a sustainable industry into the future. So let me start with a question for both of you. Based on your experience, what has the industry done well with respect to securing and maintaining social license to operate? And then maybe on the flip side of that, if you want to share some aspects that you think give us our biggest challenges in those areas. Chris, you want to go first?
Yeah, I would say I've seen it go both ways in projects that I've been involved with. And more recently, I think one of the advantages that we've had of being a younger demographic in some of the companies is that we grew up in an environment where we had consultation with our local communities right from the beginning. And a company like Phil's, I mean, they do a great job. They've been in operation for such a long time. So they're not the issue. But some mining companies are headed by executives that maybe I think they crave the old days when they didn't have to ask, they could just do. And maybe it was a story of ask for forgiveness and not permission. Whereas a lot of the younger geologists and engineers that we work with, right from the get-go, we've been involved in consultation with the communities, and we've been doing environmental monitoring and other items to make sure that we start off on the right foot. And even just in my career, I was involved with a mid-tier producer previously, and that producer, it was a few years after I left the company and actually joined Great Bear, they had a catastrophic failure of their tailings dam, and the environmental repercussions and the social repercussions of that, which really stem from a lack of consultation and a lack of appropriate engineering as well. I've seen it go terribly wrong too, fortunately not firsthand. So I think there's been some positive changes that have been brought into the industry recently. And I say that we're in probably a better place as an industry than we were a few decades ago.
So you know, I can sort of build on what you're saying, Chris, because the thing that I've noticed about the industry that's probably the greatest strength, and one that's probably not well recognized, is our willingness to change. Mm-hmm. You know, if I go back and I look at the history of Hecla, we were mining, you know, at the turn of the last century, And we were following the rules of the game as we went along. And those rules continually changed. And what became acceptable changed. And not only Hekla, but lots of companies changed with that, and the industry changed with that. And so I think that's actually one of the biggest strengths of the industry is our willingness to change, our willingness to embrace the need to change. This idea of we're in a responsible investing environment. I think the mining industry in general has embraced that idea. It used to be called social license to operate. Used to be sort of the catchphrase. It's been something that we have been doing for a long time, and we're getting better at it. What we thought was acceptable, 40 years ago, isn't acceptable today, and we've changed along the way. The other thing that I would say that's sort of on the negative side is it has to be done in the context, and I'll probably keep coming back to this idea because I think it's fundamental. It's got to be done in the context of quality assets. Hekla over the years has acquired a number of entities, and typically the assets that we acquire, those are great, but we also what comes along are assets that we really didn't want, or projects that we really had nothing to do with, and we end up sort of holding the bag. And the reason these things typically, when you go back and deconstruct them, that they've created the problems they've created is because they weren't good projects to begin with, and people tried to sort of swim upstream and do something that the project didn't justify.
Well, I'm curious.
And it's cost millions.
Yeah, millions, tens of millions, probably.
I've been in that position too on a smaller scale. We could probably trade stories, going in and cleaning up a mess that somebody else has left on a project. You would have seen it more than me, but I've seen it too.
Yeah, and obviously I've gotten involved in a few of those as well. A question, your remarks brought up another thought. For the most part, we're talking about our experience in North America, but what's the rest of the world doing? Are they behind us in this, the place that we're at here in North America and the way companies here operate? Obviously, we have some pretty stringent laws and a lot of experience and a lot of experienced people in this part of the world, but are we exporting that expertise and knowledge very effectively outside of places like North America?
Well, I only know the countries outside of North America that I have dealt with over the course of my career. Since I've been at Hekla, we were the largest gold producer in Venezuela when I arrived. We exited from Venezuela in 2008, and I've had operations in all sorts of difficult countries. And the short answer is, I think for the most part, the industry embraces the standards that they have in the US and in Canada, or in wherever they're primarily operating in, and they try to apply those across the board. Certainly every place I've worked, that's been the view. And so sometimes the regulatory environment is not as well established as it is in the United States and these other countries, or in Canada than these other countries. But the companies embrace the sort of standards that we have here. What is really hard to deal with, though, is the fact that you might be in a place where they culturally don't have the same sort of culture of environmental concerns, safety concerns. And I can tell you, in Venezuela, you would see these guys, coming off shift, and they would jump in the back of a pickup truck going 50, 60 miles an hour down a road, standing on the bumper of the back of the pickup truck. And so trying to change their view of how to operate safely was a huge challenge, but one that we embraced, and I think the mining industry in general embraces.
Yeah, I'd add to it. I mean, most of us in the industry are professionals of some type. I'm a professional geologist. There's many professional engineers. and we're bound by the standards of the organizations that we're members of. And in that sense, like when you have an American or a Canadian or an Australian, for instance, a geologist or engineer operating a project, we will operate the project to the standards that we're accustomed to. And I think it doesn't entirely translate in some jurisdictions, but it has a positive impact on the jurisdictions where our companies and projects are working.
Okay. Thanks, gentlemen. You know, one of the things that we all know about, I mean, we run into it all the time, is sort of the legacy of the mining industry. Just yesterday, my sister, I pointed out to her that all the green energy things that she's supportive of require a secure mineral supply chain. And she's a doctor. And her comment to me was, well, yeah, if you can do it safely and environmentally soundly, but I don't know that the industry can really do that because they make such a mess. And, you know, I almost said, well, I don't trust doctors because they still bloodlet and use leeches and make poultices out of manure. Because effectively that's, you know, she was equating practices that would be about that far back in her profession to a lot of what was going on. And so obviously, if we're going to attract the young investors, the ones who are looking for responsible investments, we're going to have to change this perception. And this characterization of us, we know, is inaccurate. It's misleading. And we know what some of the sources of that are, but what do we do to change that?
Well, I'll speak on this one first, and it's just from personal experience. I have a couple of children. One is 15 and one is 12 now. And I always look at the first place to do that is in the home. And when you have a discussion with your kids about where products come from, you know, if it's not grown, it's pretty much mined, right? These are the two points that we need to convey. But we've gone into, like, my partner in Great Bear, our VP Exploration, Bob Singh, he frequently goes into elementary schools and high schools in our area and talks about not only product production from a mining context, but also the reclamation that's done afterwards. And there's some beautiful examples here. I'm talking to you from the Vancouver area of past quarries and mines right around here that have been converted into botanical gardens. Some of these projects, open pits, have been converted into beautiful lakes and other recreational areas. I think it's on us as an industry to show people that we do have the ability to operate a project. And in many cases, we can leave the environment where the mine is in as good, or in some cases better shape than when we began that operation. So start in the home, start in the schools, and make sure that the kids are educated about these points from a young age, so that they're not just hearing about mining from that, you know, textbook that you said your sister was getting that information from there, Jeff.
Well, and yeah, it's a continual problem. This need to try to change perception, and the conclusion I've come to is that it will happen over time, and we need to do it, you know, what Chris was talking about. We need to go and sort of fight the fight, but we need not to get too exercised about it, because I think it's probably a cyclical thing that maybe runs in terms of generations rather than decades, because the same question was raised when I started in the industry in 1986, exactly the same thing, that the perception was negative. And we just have to do the right thing and tell people about it, and just accept that it will take time for there to be, you know, for there to be a real change in that perception. And frankly, not get too worked up about it, that it's, you know, that we have comments made like your sister made, Jeff, and you try to correct them, but just keep doing the right thing and move on.
Yeah, I just hope she doesn't listen to this. This seminar. I'm not going to send her the link. But one of the other things that I know that we've talked about in the past is that basically what we can do as people leading an industry and setting examples for other people, and things like carbon emission reduction and things like that. And I know that's a place, Phil, that I know you guys are pushing hard on. You want to comment a little bit about that?
Sure, would be glad to. We're a unique company in that our operations are quite small. Notwithstanding that we produce 40% of all the silver mined in the United States, and we're the third largest lead and zinc producer, but we're just mining these very, very high grade ore bodies, and we're mining them underground, and we're moving, the number of tons in a year that other companies are moving in a day. And as a result of that, the sort of environmental impact that we have is really, really small. So to put that in a context, we produce about 100,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions every year. There's your lights.
There's my lights going off.
I won't stop speaking. We produce a really small amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Someone like Newmont is over 3 million tons. To give you a context, 100,000 versus 3 million tons. So as a result of that, we look at it and say, okay, one of the things that as an industry we can do is to see more underground mines, and I think that's going to happen. The other thing that we can do is just change the way we operate, and so we are continuously. We've got Mine Expo coming up with the National Mining Association next week. We're going there, and part of the reason we go, and I bring the board, and we'll have 50 employees there, is to look at these new technologies that we can deploy. Battery technology, we've been testing different things. So we're doing different things in order to reduce that greenhouse gas emission. And I think you're gonna, we're part of the solution to this issue, this question. We make copper, we make silver, we make metals that are necessary for this change in how we energize our economy. And so it's actually probably the most exciting time for me in my career to be really at the front edge of what people are seeing happening in the future.
Chris, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's our project in Ontario is fortunate because it's located basically under a power line, which is the power is produced by hydroelectric means, and the hydroelectric generating station is owned. A quarter of that ownership is by one of the local First Nations groups. So by being able to tap into a power source like that, you have an environmentally beneficial or minimally impactful form of electricity, and you're putting net benefit, immediate financial benefit into the local First Nations community. So we're really fortunate there. And other factors too, like we were just talking about technology and improvements in technology and in education. And one of the things that can be looked at is sort of the net carbon footprint of a project. And of course, electrification of the vehicle fleets is something that we're very much looking forward to in the industry. And I used to work underground at a high-grade underground gold mine in Nevada, and I would have been incredibly happy if we had electrically powered muckers at that time, because the need for ventilation and other things when you're sitting underground and you've got a diesel engine belching away at you is very different than if you had something like a sewing machine engine humming along quietly. Using electrical power. So a lot of these changes will benefit on the environmental side, but they'll also benefit worker environment and health and safety. So we look forward to these innovations coming in as that kind of technology is widely adopted.
And productivity, right? You're gonna adopt these things, and you're gonna improve productivity with less maintenance that you're having to do on the vehicle. So it really is a very exciting time in the industry. I talked about change earlier. This is a time of huge amount of change that we expect to have, I would say, over the course of the next 15 to 20 years. So it's a great time for investors to recognize, okay, this is an industry that's changing. How do I invest in it, and where do I invest in the companies that are embracing those changes?
Chris, you said something just a minute ago about obviously, and we've talked before You have a real emphasis on working closely with the communities and First Nations and other stakeholders who are going to be affected or could affect your operation. What are some of the key lessons that you've learned about what's worked and what didn't work, or anything you'd want to change in how you approach that? I know you have some good stories to tell.
Yeah, you definitely want to consult first and then act, so that everybody that is in the area that you're working understands the flow of what to expect. And really, I mean, it's quite simple. If you look at it, like the benefits of a mine, I have to gesture with my hands. I don't know why I have to do that. It's not like but I'll do this anyway. So the benefits of a mine flow to all the investors and the shareholders and the people that get the products. And it's this huge distribution network. When you put a mine into production, like Phil's talking about, they're producing all these metals and they're going into all these products, and shareholders are making money and everybody is getting paid that has jobs. You can see the benefits and you can see they're widely distributed. But the net effects, the environmental impacts of a mine or the social impacts, those are in the area that the mine is. So those effects are concentrated in one place. And you have to make sure when you're initiating a project, something new especially, that the local communities understand what those impacts are likely to be. And, it's fair is fair. If you're going to have the burden of impact, you should also have a share of the benefit from that as well. And we can think about those benefits in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's direct remuneration, which offsets some of the loss of land use or whatever it may be. And sometimes it's skills training. Sometimes it's employment, other sort of educational opportunities. There's all kinds of ways that the mine being in operation can feed back into the community positively. And what you want to see at the end of the day is that net positive. And when I think about our project and the scale of the discovery, I just look forward to, in the future, decades of families benefiting and that area benefiting. And then at the end of the day, having a nice remediation effort, which maybe that would be the kind of thing you would be involved with, Jeff. And you'd have a nice cleaned up site, a productive environment. And I've seen some, excellent land use from these projects afterwards. And I've seen it go terribly wrong at times, this whole process, when you don't get out in front of it. I've been involved with projects where it ends up adding delays, and you end up with hurt feelings, and you end up the risk of a project. It's difficult for some companies. Like I said, we're a single asset development stage company, putting resources together, permitting and everything else. It's hard for companies in our state. You take on extra risk by having, instead of a diversified portfolio of producing assets where you have cash flow coming in everywhere, you're raising money in the market and you're trying to deliver on schedule. If you don't consult properly up front, you can have that negative voice that comes up through miscommunication or misunderstanding, and it can take years extra to get your permits in place and get that cash flow in place. So that can be highly detrimental to your shareholders. And you definitely want to avoid that happening. And the way to do it is to get out in front of it properly in the first place.
Phil, you want to weigh in
the
on that one?
the only thing I'll add is something that Luke Russell, a retiring colleague of mine, how he described it. He said, you go into an area, and oftentimes because it's change, people oppose it. And then they come to accept it, maybe reluctantly, maybe not. But then over time, they come to own it. And that's really, what happens over time. And, Chris, I suspect, the reclamation is going to be way out there, because you're going to find more, and it's going to keep growing and keep having a long-term impact. And that's the thing that happens is these mines, good quality mines, they tend to be in very good geologic environments, and they tend to grow over time. And the community, the benefit that you have becomes less one of us and them, but more one of they are part of our operation. So, it's quite remarkable, the engagement that we have with people. And it's not engagement that is us versus them. It's engagement of, okay, how's our mind doing?
What's your longest lived project, Phil? Like, what's the one that's been in
operation?
Well,
the Lucky Friday is 75 years.
That's
and it's probably and it probably has another 75 years to go. And we just had a guy start with us who is the 5th generation to work for Hecla.
It's incredible. So that whole family is a Hecla family. That's what we'd like to see that too. And that's you don't want to.
And that's what the mining. That's really what the mining industry does more than not. These projects tend to be multi-decades, maybe multi-generational.
Yeah. Our local mines too in Red Lake. I mean, the Campbell Mine complex has been in operation for 80 years. So that's the same principle, generations. My grandfather actually was an underground miner, and those skills and the history in the family, it can be passed along, right? So you want to see that on these projects. So,
yeah. Phil, I want to go into another subject here just for a second, and I'm going to ask you this question since you're basically working primarily in the US. Obviously there's been change of administration. It's led to a lot of rethinking and reprioritizing various issues. And right now the current US administration's pushing both green energy and also mineral supply chain security. And obviously that potentially brings some interest.
It's shocking, right? It's shockingly good.
It is. I mean, it's both of those things have the potential to really give our industry a chance to show what we can do. But I just wondered if you had any thoughts on where you see that going, and if you see any pressure points through that process as we try and sort some of that out.
Well, look, there is no one type of Democrat. Right? There's just like there's no one type of anything, and so you have a range of views within the Democratic Party, but it is a seismic shift to have a Democratic president say the things and put out the executive orders that Biden has put out. So it is a opportunity for our industry to help educate primarily the Democrats, help educate the Democrats that in the past had no openness to the education, and now they do, as to the bringing back the supply chain and allowing mines go forward. It will be a struggle though, because you've got those that really don't maybe have the view of your sister that have, and sorry to bring her up again,
I'm going to be in so much trouble.
Have the view of your sister that you can't operate safely, but that's part of the education, and there's now at least an opening to educate people.
I would think so. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time, but I'd like to ask one last question of each of you. You guys could decide who goes first. If you had to name one thing that's going to be most critical for your company to do in the next, say, 2 to 5 years to ensure its future in this current investing environment, what would that be?
I'll let you go first, Chris.
I would say we really need to handle the topic of this discussion properly. Is we need to have that social license from the communities, and we need to make sure that the environmental aspects of the project are understood, mapped out, and implemented properly. Because these are the things that, if they're not done correctly, cause delays, and they cause a lack of permitting and a lack of progress on a company. And I think we're off to a fantastic start, and I want to see more of that continue. I think a lot of people in the industry in Canada, when the government adopted the UN DRIP, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, there was some concern within the industry. But I'm actually happy to see these sort of laws go into place, because they provide certainty off a consultation pathway. You're better off to have a set of rules that you stick to, where you understand the framework and you understand the steps and the outcome. That's going to lead to projects getting built, and that's going to lead to maximizing economic benefits. What you don't want is uncertainty. Uncertainty is that's always the devil. You don't know, and you never want to deal with him. So I want to see us do what we to do all these ESG steps properly, and that's going to lead to success in our company and project.
All right, thanks, Chris. Phil?
Well, this is maybe a little bit off topic, but it is related to this topic of how you position yourselves, and it really comes to having guys like Chris and younger in your organization. You know, the biggest challenge I think our industry has is, and we're not alone in this, it's the aging of the baby boom generation. And you know, we need these young, bright, capable engineers, geologists, accountants, you know, chemists. You know, there's just a variety, HR people, administrators. There's just a variety of skills that we need. And so if a developer, explorer is going to be successful, they've got to be able to attract those people into their company, because you got to have these good, high quality people in order to bring good, high quality projects forward. And so that's the biggest challenge we have. And I think generally it's the biggest challenge for the industry, but I think it's being done in the best context that we've had in my career. So I'm very optimistic.
I will say too, Phil, like, you know, guys in the baby boomer generation, some of you guys have been phenomenal mentors for the people in my generation. And, you know, we have an opportunity to pass on those skills and really build a better team in the future.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both, Phil, Chris. It's been great to get to know you a bit, and I've enjoyed our chats. And thank you for all of your very insightful comments and thoughts today.